Hello, and welcome to another edition of NCI Live. I'm your host, David Groth, and wanted to welcome everyone. And today we're going to be talking about the new release of the Veeam Backup Suite, release 12. Joining me today is Roger Lund, who is a solution architect here at NCI and an expert on the Veeam platform. Welcome, Roger. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks again for joining us. Also, thanks for all of you for joining us today. Just wanted to remind everyone that we are, in fact, live on both YouTube and LinkedIn. If you do have any questions for us about any of these topics that we're talking about or the product in general, you chat us and we'll answer them live here on the air, and we can have a kind of an interactive conversation. With that, Roger, let's talk Veeam.
Yeah.
So
Veeam, what
So
do you want to talk
Veeam
about?
has been a product that many people use as their backup software of choice. Um,
Yep.
there's been many products out there that have been used for backing up not only one, like say one server, but many servers, data, applications, what have you. But Veeam has been around for quite some time. But they have a new release. What is so important about this release? And I know there's a lot of with every release of software, there's always um, you could go through a litany of things, but why are we talking about this today?
Yeah. There's several exciting things about Veeam 12 in my book, but I would say probably the number one reason that people are excited about Veeam 12 is the ability to support vSphere 8 fully.
Mm,
Right.
okay.
That is a big one for a lot of customers. Obviously, you have some basic support with 11A, but if you're gonna want to utilize Veeam support and VMware support, like you probably would, you'd really want to be on 12, right? So that's gonna be probably the first thing that get a lot of customers moving that direction. Um, you know, Update one has been out now for a couple months, a month and a half or so for vSphere 8. So that's kind of signals the tipping point for a lot of customers to consider that product. So
Yeah.
um, see them
With
coming to adopt in it.
with version 11.8, it was you could do it, but it was not as tightly integrated or fully supported as it was
Correct.
with 12. With 12, it's
Yeah.
full boat. You've got
Yep.
everything available to you.
Exactly.
So
And
no,
then
that definitely is a big deal.
yeah, it's a big deal. So then, of course, I think the one that everybody's talking about is direct support for backing up to object storage, right?
Okay.
Um,
Let's
and
talk a little bit briefly
what
then, quick. So we go through this in depth because yes, when I saw this, I was like, yeah, this is incredibly appointment. What is object storage versus traditional disk-based storage? Why is this important?
Yep. So it's all about the file system or lack of, so to speak, right? Um, so object storage. Think of it more like how data is laid down on like a disk, like a CD or Blu-ray disc, where it's not written in a certain order. It's just there's chunks of data that are there, and it's usually somewhat resilient, right? Where, and I'm talking on a really high level here. um,
Absolutely.
Traditional file system, you've got some overhead that has to happen. You've got parity going on. You've got some limitations on the file allocation sizes and all of those things, right?
hmm
That natively you have to worry about. I'm sure we've all experienced what happens if you format a drive with FAT32, and then you're stuck with the 4 gig limit, right?
Yep.
Or if you do a default format of a large drive, and then you go past the limitation with the default allocation size, you can't
hmm
expand that anymore, right? So there
Right.
becomes some challenges there. Um, when we're talking about big data sets, and traditionally backups is one of those big data sets, right? So
Certainly.
object storage has obviously become popular with cloud platforms um, because they offer that at a very reduced cost. So
Sure. So you're backing up individual chunks as opposed to like say the files written out in a file
correct,
system. You're just
correct, yep,
backing up chunks of data. Yeah.
exactly.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
so object storage generally, traditionally, lets you do a couple things interestingly. One is you can generally have some good resiliency built into the platform. And generally, you can back up extended archives or retention periods because it's a cheaper per terabyte than of spinning drives, right? Or
Yep.
you know SSDs or or local storage arrays or whatever it is DAS that you're backing up to today. Um, Now, in version 11, you could back up to object storage as part of a capacity tier if you're using a scale out repository, right? This allows you to back up to object as both the primary direct without a scale out repository, or in the performance tier in a scale out repository, and the capacity tier separately.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have different tiers of object storage, right? Fast, slow, if that makes sense.
And henceforth, expensive, cheap.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So
So
a lot more
that's cool.
flexibility there. And for those nerds like me, exciting. So
Yeah. Very true. So one of the other features that I saw that was kind of interesting is the ability to, as far as the local piece versus when you're talking about the cloud, uh, not having to dump locally. That was just going direct, hence the direct object storage.
yeah.
So that and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so traditionally, like I said, you'd have to have a scale out repository to make a copy, or you'd have to have a cloud provider as a cloud repository, and you generally have to do a copy job to get that data out there. And if you're
Mhm.
doing that in a method, and one of the challenges as your data sets get larger is it can be harder and harder to have a local copy that can have the retention that you need, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so this kind of lets you bypass that direct to cloud approach, right?
Mhm.
It also lets you use cloud like object platforms locally if you'd like to, right? And so um, a plethora of NASs out there, and you know things like storage that has native object support,
Mhm.
or platforms like Ceph, or different things that you can build that OpenStack and so forth that support object natively, that you could use on-prem as that first level direct storage for object that you just couldn't do before. And why that's important is it's easier to maintain that, right, than
Mhm.
trying to maintain a RAID array. It's just can be a really big challenge, especially when you have very large disks. Because one of the big challenges of very large disks is your rebuild times, right? So you start
So,
putting 18 terabyte drives in a RAID 6, and those take a very long time to rebuild.
so,
Object storage generally handles RAID differently,
so
So
we've been talking. I mean, we've been kind of getting really deep in here. Let's bring it
yeah,
back just
sure,
slightly. And what I'm seeing in the industry as a whole is, and it's just been developing and developing and developing, is we like to say that it's going towards the cloud, and that may be true, but we get into the idea of a hybrid infrastructure.
yep.
And would you say or characterize that Veeam 12 has many more of the features that lend itself to that hybrid cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement, right? And again, one of the interesting things is I'm going to say, we talk about clouds. So what does that mean, right? Well, we think of clouds generally of things like, Amazon,
Hmm.
Google, right? But
Yep.
one of the other partners that was announced in this release was Wasabi, right? And so Wasabi is a backup focus cloud.
Yep.
And I say it's focused, it's one of their focus areas. Obviously, they have others, but they
Hmm.
offer that as as a product. And
Hmm.
there's a tight integration with Veeam there. So again, depending on your strategy, it allows you to get that data offsite, but maybe you already have workloads in one
Hmm.
of the clouds, and Veeam has Veeam for Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, all these things. So maybe you want to go from there to another platform, something like Wasabi that's cloud based, right? So,
Hmm. No,
um,
absolutely.
or or something that's uh, to your point, the opposite direction. You could build a hybrid cloud that you had a copy on site, right? So,
Right. No, absolutely. So, and there's also talk of, I know that you personally are a very big proponent of the hyper converged infrastructure, going away from your traditional two servers and a SAN to a converged infrastructure where everything is, scalable
mhm.
horizontally as well as vertically. So, and then that also lends itself, of course, to a cloud-based scenario. My understanding is that 12 really dives into that hyperconverged infrastructure and allows it to be um, backed up much more easily.
Correct, exactly. So one of the things that, as people look at platforms, I would pick on Nutanix because Nutanix is
No, that's your
a
baby.
fairly
Mm,
fairly mature product in that, you know, platform infrastructure. So as you know, hyperconverged, what does that mean, right? Well, that's server and storage realistically in a small footprint. Um, Backing up that platform means that you need to have, support for the unrunning operating system if you're running, AHV or if you're running VMware, but also maybe you want to use one of their product sets, right? And so one of the things they offer is a file platform. It's called Nutanix Files, right? Lets you
mhm,
dump your CIF or SMB type data out into a single platform that lets you manage NCI analytics and all these things, right? In that,
mhm.
yeah. So they, in 12, there's some enhancements to the integrations there as well. So,
Yeah, that's very cool. Just effectively keeping pace with the modern trends when it comes to compute and storage and other things.
right.
Let's talk a little bit about the security of backups because a lot of people, when they think of backups, they think of it as a um, disaster recovery product, but they don't think of the security of backups themselves.
Yep.
How would you say that Veeam 12 speaks to that aspect?
Yeah. So to talk through that, let's take a look real quick at a high level of Veeam 11 and
Hmm.
how they handled some of their security around things like ransomware, right? So,
Hmm.
Veeam 11, they had a new feature that came out that was basically a hardened repository, right? What that means is you could build a Linux server and you could present Linux with storage, right? To be able to
Hmm.
have your repository data in Linux, and then you can harden that repository to support immutability. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Now that
And
was
just
the
to be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to
yep.
be clear, immutability, for those that aren't familiar with it, that is basically put it on there and it can never be changed. Like you write it and it's can't be
Yeah,
changed.
think of it as worm, right? And so if you're familiar, write once, read many type
Hmm.
technologies, right? And the differentiator here is to be able to say, I want to guarantee that data is there for X number of days.
Hmm. Got it. Okay.
And so if you said 30 days, you could set that in that repository. So
Mhm.
in 11, that was a feature that was new, right? So there's some new enhancements there. One of the things was to make it secure, you had to create accounts and limit access to that Linux repository underneath. Well, then when it came time to upgrade, it was a little more of a there was a little more involved process to get through that,
Mm,
right?
yep.
Um, and so, now they don't require you to have SSH on for the entire upgrade process, for example. You can kind of
Okay.
enable it, start it. It's more, streamlined. So that's
Cool.
a big one because, obviously you want to be able to make that as streamlined as possible when you have, you know, a
Yeah.
chunk of your environment that is secure and you have to maintain that, right, as part of your backups.
Yeah. Protects your
Um,
backups. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So now, the other thing is there's more types of support. Your NAS backups and agent backups are also supported there. You can now do immutability into Azure, right?
Mm,
Um, as well as the Wasabi that I was talking about before. So that's a big deal for a lot of us that use Azure to back up to.
mm,
Um, Same thing. You can control that. Obviously, you could go through the configuration of the containers and and stuff in Azure first, but the fact that that support is there is a big deal, right? Um, and that's just kind of scratching the surface, right, of
mm,
immutability. But Another one that I think is going to be important for a lot of us is the multi-factor authentication
Mm,
support. So,
yep. Very hot
just
topic.
yeah, both one-time password support, all those types of things, right? So,
Sure.
um, that's a big, that was a big one for as we see more and more ransomware in the industry. Your insurance providers are making that a requirement, right?
Mm,
So a lot
mm.
of customers asking for that feature. So
Excellent. I'm going to interrupt here and say that just again, want to remind everybody that is watching, if you have questions, technical, high level, or otherwise, and you want to go ahead and chat them to us, we'll be happy to answer them here on the air. So I just want to again remind everyone of that. All right, let's continue on here. Let's talk about the actual, destination of these backups. The cloud storage for these. What cloud platforms? Because there's obviously more than one. What
yeah,
cloud platforms will this support? Can you give a
yep.
couple of examples?
Yeah, a couple examples. We touched on a couple of them, right? So Wasabi is one, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and IBM Cloud, right? Those are kind of like the
Hmm.
big players, right, off the top of my head.
Hmm.
And then um, there's a there's a pretty large subset of storage appliances that are supported as well, right?
Hmm.
But those clouds are probably the ones that most people are going to go target for. So, and the biggest difference there is in 11, it was for immutability, it was only AWS, right?
Now
So
that's
that
supported on multiple
pretty much all
platforms.
of the major
Very
clouds
cool.
that we access in the North America market. So.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. So,
So that and why that's important, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming that most of us have heard about the term, but we talk a lot in the industry about 3-2-1 backups.
yep.
And basically having three copies of data in two different medias, and why that's important. Ransomware obviously comes to mind, but um, there's other reasons, fires and floods, and all those things, right, that
Hmm.
happen.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's also important to encrypt the data, which has been a thing in 11 as well, but just something to consider as well.
I would interject and say that one common misconception is that putting it in the cloud, whilst safe ish, I'm going to say ish because the data centers that have prevented from going down, from being not available, it does not prevent it from being infected by ransomware or these other things. And so having a backup is extremely key. A lot of people miss that portion of it or have a misconception about that. And so, we actually work with customers to make sure that they have a backup strategy in place. And the same idea that it's held true for traditional server environments holds true for, you know, uh, cloud-based systems like Azure, AWS, but also for products like 365.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I just have to make that comment because it's not. And to your point about ransomware, that's only increasing.
Yeah,
So, absolutely. So let's move on and talk about, okay, so, we've talked about all the great things that have come out, and this list is, we can go ahead and throw a link of the new features. There's a link for the new features out there. We can go ahead and throw that in after our live stream here and throw that in the notes. But let's talk about the process or the information. If you happen to have Veeam right now, what that looks like to upgrade.
yeah,
Let's talk about what requirements, first of all. Can you upgrade?
yeah. You bet. So yes, and what I mean by that is yes, it's supported, right? It's the process is familiar to those of us that have been doing it before. It's a nice, pretty window now.
Mm,
So it has a nice transition through. Um, you know, I haven't ran into any scenarios that I've had a challenge with.
mm,
Um, let's see. I'm just trying to think of some of the things that maybe would come up. Um, check your system requirements, right? Make sure
mm,
that you should have the number of CPUs that are required because I believe it checks for that now. Okay.
mm,
Make sure you've got disk space, right? Make sure you have access to the database that you're trying to upgrade from, because it's going to be doing some database changes. Um,
Mm,
Back up your database,
mm,
before you, because again, it's a SQL, right? So you can easily go in the just SQL Management Studio and do a backup of that.
mhm,
But overall, the process is pretty fluid. It will require a reboot, but
mhm.
so.
So, and this the window that it takes to upgrade this software, is it is it going to take a significant amount of time where it would be service affecting? I mean, it is your backup, so production wouldn't be affected per se,
Yeah.
but what kind of window are we talking about? Are we
Yeah,
talking
I mean, I
about
would plan
6
for a
hours? Are we
solid
talking about 20? Are we talking
hour
about 2?
to,
Okay.
yeah, just I would say it's going to take at least an hour or two, on average, assuming that
Mhm,
you're at the minimum requirements, right? And
mhm,
um, those of us that have more resources go faster, and those of us have less, you might run into
mhm,
some more speed challenges. But again, I haven't had any extended upgrades or anything like that that have had to happen. But
mhm.
should be pretty straightforward. Obviously, you've got full Veeam support if you need, right? So
Okay, that's excellent. That's excellent. So, to that point, would you recommend, or I'm going to phrase it slightly differently. Would you recommend people upgrade, or or secondary to that, are there instances where you wouldn't recommend people upgrade and stay on, say, an older version?
sure. So yeah, so the only scenario that I can think of, it would be if you're using a cloud partner, meaning that you have a private cloud Diaz type solution that you're taking Veeam on-prem and you're moving it for a replication job or a backup job or a copy job to a hosted infrastructure, meaning a service provider or cloud hosting provider, private hosting provider, whatever that is, right? If they're offering
Mhm,
Veeam as a service, basically, right?
mhm,
Make sure that they are at 12 before you
mm,
go
gotcha.
and pull that trigger. Otherwise, when you try to run your next job, it's going to fail, right?
No,
Because
yeah, that
they're going
makes
to be
total
at 12
sense.
and that's it. Yep. So other than that, I would say that as long as your system meets the system requirements, which I would say 95.9 or something percent, I'm just guessing here,
Is
are
it
going
a
to meet that because the requirements haven't changed very much from the last
is
release.
it a it's not a big gap between, like, we're not going from 2 processor, I'm guessing here, but it's not like going from 2 to 16 cores or something like that.
No, no. Like I said, it does check now, which I'm not sure it did in version 11, but it's not. Yeah, it doesn't ask for 32 cores or anything crazy. So,
No, okay, alright,
yep,
very cool.
yep.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
is there anything else you'd like to say about should people upgrade? What's your final take on the
Yeah, I
topic of
mean,
Veeam?
I, I'll just at a high level, right? vSphere 8 support, direct object support, and then 30 plus pages of release notes when it comes to
Mhm.
looking at all the
Yeah,
different features, right, in the official documentation. So lots of updates. MFA is a huge one. I mean, I think there's even like automatic lockout
mhm,
times now you can set. There's just so much there, that I would say, if you're a Veeam customer, you're happy with Veeam like we are in most care cases, let's go ahead and go to 12, right? Um,
sure,
and if you're not comfortable, let us know. We do help our clients, and can assist you there. Veeam support is excellent, of course. They're able to help you. Plus, there's Veeam communities, so
that's
don't
great.
hesitate to go out to the forums. So
Excellent, excellent. Well, I appreciate that, Roger, and, we've pretty much come to the end of our time here today. It's been, very informative. Uh, we, appreciate you coming by and visiting us. And for those of you who have stayed with us, we really do appreciate it. If you do have questions after the fact, please come out and join us on our website at www.netcenter.net, or feel free to email us at info@netcenter.net, or check us out on any of our social media channels. And don't forget to like and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and click the bell so that you're notified anytime we go live, which we do every 2 weeks at 11 a.m. Central Time. So, Roger, I really do appreciate you giving us the updates on the Veeam, and we look forward to having you here again on NCI Live. So, thanks again. That's really great.
Hey, you bet. It was my pleasure, and looking forward to next time.
All right, awesome. And thanks everyone out there for NCI Live. We'll see you next time. Thanks.